Hi, all. My name is Iris Merriouns, and I am a lifelong resident of District 7, a longtime resident of District 7, an advocate for East Oakland. I've dedicated my career to creating lasting positive change in our community. Serving as Chief of Staff to Oakland City Council members for over 25 years, I've driven real change in our neighborhoods, including efforts resulting in the creation of thousands of good-paying jobs, transformation policy changes to reduce crime, revitalize blighted neighborhoods, supported first-time home buyers, and built impactful programs for youth and young adults and seniors. My years of experience have prepared me for the challenges that Oakland faces today. It is more urgent now than ever to invest in public safety, safeguard affordable housing, create economic opportunities, and build community engagement so that every resident's voice is heard at City Hall. Right now, Oakland needs experienced leadership to attract businesses, solve our budget crisis, address homelessness, and tackle violent crime. With your support, I hope that we can create an Oakland that we once saw thrive and come back to the Oakland that we know and love. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thanks for that intro. Jessica, do you want to start off with the first
Yeah, sure.
question? Thanks.
Okay, so what are the key policy contributing to the ongoing budget deficit in Oakland? What policy changes would you propose in your first year in office to enhance the community safety and address these challenges?
So you're speaking about the budget and what policy changes we would make
Yes.
with regard to public safety regarding the budget.
Just address the challenges.
So there are multiple challenges with the
Yes.
budget,
Yeah.
as we know.
And what's your priority? Yes.
And well, when you mention public safety, the city's budget is 60 to 70% police. And this biannual budget, we had a $30 million overspend in police overtime. So instead of using that for overtime, I would take those $30 million and invest them into neighborhood services or CROs so that community could be responded to immediately. The example that we all know and have experienced lately in the city would be the 76 gas station, where the person was calling in and could not be understood. This is very important that we have enough services as it relates to public safety. Quite recently, our office, we led a project in drilling down around public safety when we saw ourselves on the news and the governor speaking to our ability to respond to based on our 911 response. As we went through the drill down, we realized that over 1,000 applications had not been processed by our our HR department for over a year. It was stunning and surprising, and we understand that things are bottlenecked in the city. However, that's unacceptable as people are calling 911 and can't get a response, and we have people that want to invest their time and energy and work for Oakland. It's a good paying job. It's over $100,000. You need to be able to type 35 words a minute. And these are not high benchmarks to meet, and we have applications that haven't been processed. So these types of changes and policy changes on how HR relates to the other departments is very important to make sure that there's not a bottleneck in our HR department so that these jobs can be filled quickly and we can respond to community frontline services. When community picks up the phone and dials 911, there should be someone on the other end. The other issue around the budget that I saw in this iteration of the budget is that because we've gone through a global pandemic, we've all witnessed, experienced, and been affected by it. We knew that we had to do something different. We used ARCA money to plug holes, which created a deficit. And you have to be prepared for the check you write, right? And so in doing so, it would have, in my opinion, I would have went through a line by line budget, which we've done in the past, each department explain exactly what's in their budget and exactly what it pays for. In addition to that, the council could bring in outside analysis to open up every single one of those funds. It is something that we should be able to do. The budget should be absolutely transparent. The budget in our charter has a time frame, even though we were in mid-cycle. When you look at the CAFR, which is posted on the CAFR being the cheat sheet to the budget, it says that all of our funds are performing well as of June 2023. But by December, there was a different story. It should not be a surprise. These are things that we knew we were looking at. We had moved forward on the progressive tax. It brought us $17 million, but it left $50 million or more on the table. When you know you're moving toward it, when you know you're moving to close a deficit, you have to create special projects in revenue. The revenue division brings in at least 30 to 40% of the general fund. And if we're not understanding how all revenue is moving in the city, especially in these times, we're not doing our best job for our residents. And I don't know if I'm over time
Yes,
or answered your
yes.
question.
Thank you. Let's move to the next question.
All right. So recently, Oakland Side, the Chamber and Empower Oakland newsletter published pieces about the upcoming PLA, the September 10th Measure U funding. And what are your thoughts on a project labor agreement on affordable housing projects? And would you vote to pass if you were on council today?
So project labor agreements, we already have an existing project labor agreement, first and foremost. And project labor agreements can be tricky. We want to make sure that it's well thought out, that we are not closing off opportunities for our community residents. So it's something that I believe that we can work with the building trades, but we better make sure that it's well thought out. Because when we do contract out, you know, there are good parts about that. So you know that the job will be done well, it will be done on time. It's work that you can be proud of at the end of the day. However, we also want to make sure that the pipeline for the apprenticeships lead to journeyman jobs. So those are the things that I think the council would weigh and measure in this decision on a project labor agreement. But it's very important that the auspices of the city, the county, the school district, is to employ their citizenry. So instead of having these bulky contracts for $60 million, we might want to look at $10 million contracts so that we're employing people who live here, so that that money rolls back around in our community. So these are things that we need to balance, but we also need to make sure that these projects are done well and on time. So in some cases, they're great. In other cases, we need to really make sure that we are in full agreement all the way around. So I do support it, but I also want to make sure that we are not cutting off chances for Oakland residents, and that these are pipelines to journeyman jobs. Recently with the carpenters, I realized that there was a woman who was a journeyman that had come through Mandela Training Center, and she started off through an apprentice program with the carpenters. So these PLAs do work, but we want to make sure that we are hiring, that Oakland gets a percentage of the jobs.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. The next question. And we have roughly about 3 minutes for each question, but that was perfect.
Oh, I'm okay.
That was perfect.
So yeah, let me know if I'm going too long.
And you can just look at me if you want to know like where you're at, but I'll just
Okay,
I'll
you'll
wave
tell
at
me.
you or something when
Okay,
time's up. Yeah.
Thanks.
Sounds good. All right, we have another question here. Our neighbors across the bay, San Francisco, and that our neighbor across the bay, has mandated that all departments are back in City Hall 3 days a week, which does not include frontline workers who obviously need to be there as needed. Would you support and champion the Oakland City employees returning to work 3 days a week to start immediately?
Absolutely. Is there any? Yes, I think that, well, let me just say this. Again, I've worked for the city for 25 years or so. I've been back with the city 18 months. I go into the office and the other staff in our office come in every single day. So these are the unseen things. I leave there at 9 and 10 at night, but I'm there every day. That's not something that everyone does, but it's important to make sure that you're doing the best that you can for the residents. I've dedicated my life to public service, and it doesn't mean that you work from home. Some of our other parts of operation, which would be building services, where you want to go to the planning department, it brings in a lot of revenue. The lines cut off at a certain time of the day, and if businesses want to open, you need to make changes to your property. You want to see someone there. The other thing that is important to me, and that's why I said, take that extra money and create a neighborhood services division or extra community service workers. They can take 100 calls a day. If you have 10 of them or 5 of them, that's 500 calls a day to navigate things inside the city. It is not fair for folks that pay taxes to dial a number and not get a live person or not get a return call. And that's been the sense of our community, is something that, when we look for ways to support things that we do, we add on another tax. And I think residents are hesitant about paying additional taxes because the taxes that they pay for, they want to see some service for it.
Thank you.
Did I answer your question?
You did,
Okay.
very directly.
Beyond the budget concerns, what do you consider to be the most pressing issue facing Oakland? What do you believe is the underlying cause of this issue, and what specific policy changes or amendments to existing policies would you propose to effectively resolve it?
Well, the resounding issue in Oakland is public safety. That has been, and there are many facets of that. Public safety, we are looking at, and one of the things, I don't want to just say public safety, I would say public safety and homelessness coupled. I believe that in order to triage a homeless encampment, you need a clinical background. We have a lot of things happening in our encampments. It's crime, it's drug addiction, it's mental health, and undiagnosed mental health needs that are not being addressed. One of the things that I'm quite happy about in speaking with the county, they're our partners, and Councilmember Taylor can tell you this, I've always said public health crisis and homelessness are one thing. So it's not just a homelessness issue, it's also public health. And when we're not addressing it with our county partners, we lose half of the thutter to get where we need to go. And quite recently, in speaking to the county, you'll be proud of me, they've agreed to have a policy body where council members and supervisors meet together in one policy body. These are the kinds of changes that we need. We have to work with our community partners, our sister agencies like East Bay Mud and PG&E, because we're all in this together. People pay taxes, they pay bills. We have to do something a little more creative than we've been doing to address the problems. Everybody has a piece of the problem, and I don't know if I answered that question.
I think you gave a good indication of where you stand on it. I think
Okay.
that's helpful. Yeah.
We have about 8 minutes to do follow-up questions. So if someone wants to start, I actually have I have one, and then welcome whoever else wants to go. On the one about the PLA, I don't think I heard like a yes, no. Like I think the question was, you probably know a lot about the Measure U PLA that's going before council on September 10. And the question was like, how would you vote if you were on the council today?
And again, I think that there are conversations going on right now, and that would determine the vote. We want to make sure that, again, that we are not knocking out Oakland jobs, that we are also making sure that Oakland citizens are able to move into those jobs, and or at least the apprentice programs move folks from this community into journeyman jobs. Those are some of the things that are being discussed. I'm not part of those discussions, but that's something that I would want to see move forward with a PLA.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question for you guys.
Go ahead, Laura.
Yeah. So you mentioned the overrun in police overtime that we saw in the recent budget. One thing I know is that we have historically, as a city and the council, underestimated what overtime would be, meaning that when we established the budget in the first place, we set the expected overtime spend much lower than we have seen the historical overtime spend. And then we are surprised that we end up overspending what our budget is, even though we essentially sandbagged in that way. As a council member, how will you, as one of 7, engage/lead on more accurate budgeting of expenses, even though that may mean that you can't pad additional revenues in the budget that make more constituents happy to see their line item?
Well, I think one of the things that would drive any budget is looking at data. So you want to look at the crime data. You want to look at where the high indicators are in your city to determine. Your budget is simply a projection, right? And so if you're not looking at, we've gone through all of this pandemic. There are a lot of challenges that people are having. People are driving, using our streets like a highway. They're very different types of crimes. People have moved out of a certain street economy into a different one. So if you're not looking and doing the analysis of what your crime trends are, then how do you then begin to budget properly? All of this is weighted, measured into your decision. And if you're not looking at all of it, you can not be fully informed and make a decision that, we tend to sort of catch up with later. So, you build certain things into the budget. And as we look at community economic development, I believe public safety should be threaded through that. I've always believed that's the way forward. If we wanted to attract businesses are the lifeblood of the city. That's what pays for the services. We have to do both. And if we're not, and that would buffer up and give you more money for police services. So the ecosystem has to be a well-oiled machine, but we have to be thinking on all levels. And I think that's important that we consider the data that we see coming out of crime trends. I'm sorry, something jumped up on me.
Yeah.
Because that also will weigh your decision on how you look at it forward. You'll be able to project on your own. You look at other cities that have the same exact population. These are all the things on the policy side that we as staff do so that we can advise properly. And so a lot of council members don't necessarily do this, but I've been in the policy area. I've done the analysis, so I think I'm well prepared to look at this in a different eye.
Thank you.
I hope I answered your question.
You did.
Okay.
I have a question. No, I'm sorry. No, you haven't said anything. Go ahead.
My question was almost like Lauren's, although the one piece I didn't hear is in that first question is where you would reallocate the money. I wasn't sure on where you said that would be reallocated to. The excess.
The $30 million. The $30
million, yeah.
I think neighborhood services and a crime reduction team would be important to responding to emergency calls that are coming into the city of Oakland. Neighborhood services is a division. They have been in the police department and out of the police department. So they've fallen under city administration, and then at times they fall under the police department. Neighborhood services is critical to how the community navigates the city. We went from 19, I believe we have 4, and they are now in public works. And so when I started with the city neighborhood services, that's where I cut my teeth. They're on the streets, plus pressing the flesh daily. They're the ears and eyes for community, for the city administration, and for council to understand what's happening in the community. Some of these issues we can resolve at the community level, some of them are not. But when people can touch a neighborhood services coordinator and figure out how to navigate something, how to use 311, how to, what to do when you have some issue in your community, if you need foreclosure resources, whatever, if you need to speak with the county instead of the city, this is where you get that help from. And I think and it also informs the budget as well, because you hear what's happening in each community. Each community is different. West Oakland is different from North Oakland. Central is different from Deep. You have different issues that crop up in community, and you have to be able to pivot as a council and as an individual council member to meet the needs and get along and work with your colleagues to make sure that you're doing something that works for the entire city. But you also want to involve residents, and that's where your neighborhood services folks come in, because you are working directly with residents that are impacted daily. You may hear this from a group that's on Skyline, but you're hearing something from a group that's in Sabrina Park that's very different. So they do have very different needs, and we have to be able to adjust to those needs.
Thank you.
Great, and then Carol,
I think-
we'll wrap with you.
I think one of the challenges for just average citizens, and since you've been entrenched, you understand this more than the rest of the people who might be competing against you for D7. Over the last 5 years, Oakland's got a lot of money, right? You go back 6 years, we got a lot of money compared to other cities and other areas. And we don't really have an effectiveness index to determine what we did with the money or how effective it was. And so when folks say that we want more community services, we want people to do some things, and they're not licensed or they don't go through programs that we're able to determine who's there, who's the most qualified to be there, it presents challenges for getting more resources out there. And I could talk about macro being 3 times as expensive as a police officer. The idea of having red tape for housing and for business construction and incorporation. What are some things that you think we can do now to engender the trust of the community and to show that we are not spending money in a way that's wasteful?
I think there are a few things. One is City Hall's doors are open again. We went from having meetings online to now having meetings in person. I think it's important for the community to speak to the council, even if we need to adjust the meeting time, because people may not be able to be there in the day. But when you have a full council sitting there and your problem may be different from your problem, the city manager and everyone is there, that's when it's a good time to talk about what's happening in your neighborhood. It's a good time to ask the questions that you ask. Where are dollars going? You can also write the council. There are very, very many ways for the public to access the council, but we need to educate the public when these committee meetings are established, when they can come, when they can speak on their issues and how we can address them. Because I think, again, issues are different for different people in different areas. For example, someone in the Hills is going to send me an email. They will memorialize their issue. Someone in the Heartlands, they're going to call me. So there are going to be different ways that people address their issues. And I think educating, part of an elected official's job is to educate the public and invite them into City Hall. It's a democracy. It's for all of us. And I don't think if they're not hearing from us, then how do they know there's an issue there? So I think, communicating with elected officials, their staff, city departments is very important to make sure that we're meeting the needs of and hearing the voices of all Oaklanders.
Okay.
You said the city received a lot of money and you want to know where it is. So this is my budget. Open the books. We need a transparent budget process. We need to start early. We need to bring in independent analysis that's not connected to the county. That's not connected to the council, but the council has access to inform the council what's in all of these accounts. Look under every single rock. This is what we need. So that's when you ask that question, council members are better informed to respond and or ask questions to city administration.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Iris.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.